Pop culture has a very specific recipe for what makes a dinosaur famous. We demand teeth, we demand armor, we want spectacular cinematic violence. Because of this, our collective memory of the late Cretaceous is dominated by a select few: the tyrant kings and the multi-horned gladiators. But if you could actually travel back 66 million years to the lush floodplains of North America, you wouldn't just see predators. You would see oceans of different kinds of giants. You would see a creature 40 feet long, weighing 4 tons, walking on 2 legs or 4, dominating the landscape from Colorado all the way up to the Arctic Circle. This is Edmontosaurus. For more than a century, it has been cast as the ultimate background character. In textbook illustrations, it is in the background decoration. In documentaries, it exists almost exclusively to be eaten by the T-Rex. But paleontologists unearthed a profound secret. The monsters give us the headlines, but Edmontosaurus gives us the reality. It is arguably the most biologically understood dinosaur in human history. Through a series of miraculous, boundary-pushing discoveries, this single animal did something no apex predator ever could. It completely rewrote the understanding of what a dinosaur actually is. To understand why Edmontosaurus was overlooked for so long, you must understand the chaotic gold rush of early paleontology, the Bone Wars. In the late 1800s, legendary rivals Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope were racing across the American West, desperate to name as many species as possible. When they dug up massive duck-billed skeletons, they didn't see a revolutionary animal, they saw something common. Because they were finding fragments of this creature everywhere, and because they were working in a frantic rush, they gave it a dizzying array of names. For decades, the scientific community was trapped in a taxonomic nightmare. A single dinosaur genus was being called Claosaurus, Thespesius, Trachodon, and later, Anatosaurus. It wasn't until 1917 when Canadian paleontologist Lawrence Lambay analyzed 2 beautifully complete skeletons from Alberta, and that settled the dust. He named it Edmontosaurus after the Edmonton Formation. Decades later, modern paleontologists look back on all these chaotic bone wart fossils and realize the sad truth. They weren't different animals at all, they were just Edmontosaurus at different stages of life, from tiny juveniles to massive battle-hardened adults. But because they were found so frequently, a bias formed. It was labeled as ordinary, or the cattle of the Cretaceous, a boring herbivore meant to fill space in the museum halls. But nature doesn't do boring. When we look at a dinosaur skeleton, we are looking at the architectural blueprint. We see the framework, but we miss the finishings. We guess at the muscles, we speculate on the fat, and we completely invent the skin. Unless you're looking at the Edmontosaurus. In 1908, legendary fossil hunter Charles Sternberg and his sons made a discovery in Wyoming that would shock the scientific world. They found an Edmontosaurus that hadn't just been fossilized, it had been mummified. Before predators or bacteria could destroy the carcass, it was rapidly buried in arid sand. The skin dehydrated and shrank against the bones, leaving a flawless, 3-dimensional cast of a living animal's hide. For the first time, humans weren't guessing. They could see the mosaic of tiny, non-overlapping scales. They could see the reinforced pads on their feet. But the real revolution happened a century later. In 1999, a high school student named Tyler Lyson discovered an Edmontosaurus mummy nicknamed Dakota. Using massive industrial CT scanners, scientists discovered that Dakota's skin and muscle mass were far thicker than anyone had ever drawn them. Edmontosaurus wasn't a skinny reptilian lizard, it was a heavily built, muscular powerhouse. Then, in 2013 came the ultimate plot twist. Scientists excavating an Edmontosaurus in Alberta uncovered a specimen with soft tissue preserved on its skull. Sitting directly on its head was a feature that had never once appeared on a skeleton, a fleshy rooster-like comb. I mean, think of the implication of that. For 150 years, artists had drawn this dinosaur with a flat lizard-like head, but in reality it carried a vibrant, decorative crest. It was a visual warning to rival paleontologists. If we could miss a feature that massive on one of our most common dinosaurs, what else are we missing across the rest of the prehistoric world? Beyond their appearance, the fossil record of Edmontosaurus reads like an ancient true crime dossier, giving us definitive evidence of how they lived, how they ate, and how they fought. If you look inside its duck-billed mouth, you won't find a smooth beak. You'll find a biological marvel called a dental battery. Edmontosaurus possessed over 1,000 tightly packed, self-sharpening teeth. As they chewed through tough, fibrous Cretaceous pine needles, conifers, and twigs, the teeth ground against each other, maintaining a razor-sharp edge. They were living wood chippers. But their lives were far from peaceful. We have concrete, undeniable proof that Edmontosaurus was the primary target for one of the most famous predators of all time, Tyrannosaurus rex. But more importantly, we have proof that they fought back and survived. Multiple Edmontosaurus skeletons feature catastrophic injuries. One famous specimen shows a massive chunk taken out of its tail vertebrae, a bite mark that perfectly matches the spacing and impact force of an adult T-Rex. But here's the crucial detail. The bone around the bite mark shows clear signs of healing. This wasn't a carcass chewed on by a scavenger. This was a living, breathing Edmontosaurus that was ambushed by a T-Rex, used its immense muscle tail to break free, escaped into the floodplains, and lived to tell the tale. Literally, I guess. It rewrites the narrative. They weren't helpless prey. They were resilient survivors. And they didn't survive alone. Across the American West, paleontologists have uncovered mass bone beds containing thousands of Edmontosaurus individuals buried together. They traveled in massive, migrating superherds, shaping the geography of the Cretaceous world through sheer numbers. We tend to obsess over the flashy dinosaurs because they spark our imaginations. We love the predators because they feel like myth. But Edmontosaurus does something better. It bridges the gap between myth and deep time. Through its mummified skin and its hidden fleshy combs, its healed war wounds and its massive social herds, it transforms dinosaurs from monsters in a fantasy story into real, breathing, physical animals. The next time you walk through a museum and rush past the Hadrosaur to see the T-Rex, please pause a moment. The predator may hold our imagination, but the survivor standing right next to it holds the truth.